Thank you.
Okay.
We good?
Yep.
Call this meeting of the Pompton Lakes Planning Board to order. Following is the agenda for the regular meeting of the Pompton Lakes Planning Board. The meeting is to be held in the Municipal Building, 25 Lenox Avenue, on Tuesday, July 18, 2023, beginning at 7:30 p.m. Formal written advance notice, as required by NJSA 10:4-1 et sec, has been provided for this meeting at least 48 hours in advance of today, giving the time, date, and location, and to the extent known at the time, the agenda of this meeting. Such notice stated that formal action may or may not be taken. This meeting will be video recorded and will be broadcast later for later viewing by the public. The notice was, one, posted on the bulletin board outside of the offices of the municipal clerk, reserved for this and other similar announcements. Two, provided to the Suburban Trends, the newspaper designated by the council and planning board to receive such notice. And three, filed with the borough clerk. Please stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, have a roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Simone?
Here.
Mr. Trost?
Here.
Mr. Fracaro?
Here.
Ms. Michael?
Here.
Mr. Otto?
Here.
Dr. Pendexter? Mr. Keating?
Here.
Mr. Aguilar?
Here.
And Mr. Baldy?
Here.
And Mayor
Okay.
Sarah, Councilman Bennett's not.
Right. Okay, first item on the agenda is minutes. Have you all had a chance to review the minutes from June 20, 2023? And if so, what is your pleasure?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Fracaro. Second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Otto. Any questions, comments, or discussion about the minutes? Hearing none, have a roll call vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right. Now on the correspondence list. First one is for Wayne Township to amend their floodplain ordinance and to designate a floodplain administrator. The next one on it is vehicle length in residential districts in Wayne. Another one is for Wayne Transit District residential being rezoned to open space government use. The one that's important for tonight, memo from the municipal clerk, Elizabeth Bransness, ordinance 2327. That is an ordinance approving and adopting the senior housing redevelopment plan, which we will address shortly. And with that, there are no applications on the meeting tonight. So we have a new unfinished business, which is the Pompton Lakes Senior Housing Redevelopment Plan, PLP 025, Planning Board for Master Plan Consistency and Presentation. Kristen, would you like to take us on this trip?
Sure.
And this is to discuss what's going on at the county garage site on Ringwood Avenue, and to discuss we've already had, this planning board has already had the request from the mayor and council to consider it in need of a plan of a redevelopment study, and that was approved by the mayor and council, agreed to by us. That study was completed, which you'll discuss briefly.
Yep.
And then it now came back from the mayor and council for consistency. It is our obligation to just discuss what's ahead of us, and if there's questions, we can certainly address the questions. If there's any issues, we can bring them up to the mayor and council, or we can just approve it exactly as is, in which case the council would be able to then have that second reading and final adoption. Did I get that all right?
Yep.
I miss any parts?
No.
Okay. So with that said, would you please just tell us who you are formally, what firm you're with, and what we're going to do?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Kristen Russell, I'm with Banner with Colliers Engineering and Design. I work under Debbie Lawler, who I think many of you know, and she and I worked together on this document. So, her name is on it, but it was a team effort, and I'm familiar with the project. This is the senior housing redevelopment plan, and just for orientation, there are 2 blocks that are part of this site, block 2300, lots 1, 7, and 10, and block 2600, lot 2. There's also a paper street that runs between those 2 properties. As I understand it, the future of that street is still being determined, but that could be part of any future project. The total lot acreage is 3.6 acres, and it's currently the county's DPW and salt shed and recycling center. You all were probably, I assume that many of you know it just from proximity, but you were also introduced more intimately to this site when you had the area in need of redevelopment. And so this is the next step in that process. It's the same site that was talked about at that time. As you mentioned in the introduction, this is a multi-stage process. The council initially authorized a resolution directing you, the planning board, to investigate that site. That investigation was the area in need study. You then took our findings and recommended it back to council that the property be deemed in need of redevelopment based on the findings and the criteria that we found the site to meet at that time. Then council acted, and they designated the site as an area in need and threw it back to you again to have the redevelopment study conducted, which is where we are now. So there's a lot of back and forth with the planning board, making recommendations to the governing body, and then them approving it and moving things on to the next step. The redevelopment process, as I'm sure you've already gotten the impression, is multi-steps. I'm not going to go through all of them. I kind of brushed over them already, but we are currently at step 6, where the planning board reviews the redevelopment plan for consistency with the master plan. The redevelopment agency has already been made familiar with this document, and that came just before this. And right after this, you will send this back to the governing body with your recommendation. You can recommend to adopt the report as it's presented to you, or you can make recommendations for changes, or you can say, technically you can say, no, we hate this, we don't think this should be adopted. So how does a redevelopment plan, what are the seeds of a redevelopment plan? Sometimes a municipality will say, oh, we have this site that we would like to stimulate activity on, and the municipality will kind of create a redevelopment plan to generate interest. Other times, a potential developer will say, we're interested in this site, can you make the zoning on it such that it will, that we can work together to have a successful project on that site. That is the case. This time, the housing agency is purchasing the site from the county. Already a remedial action report the site has been remediated to a residential standard, and there is ongoing work there, but remediation is well underway. This is an initial concept plan. I want to stress that this is what could happen there. This is not a set in stone promise of what will happen there. This is just showing in terms of mass and layout and bulk what the content of this redevelopment plan would allow. You can see that the salt shed is still there. Well, it's on the right. I'm losing my orientation, but it's on the bottom right of the screen. And new development is happening on the left-hand side of the screen.
All right, excuse me, so
Yes.
because I think currently, right, my orientation, right, currently it's in the,
Yeah, it will
the
move.
football field.
It
So
will
you're
move.
moving it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So a redevelopment plan is essentially special zoning for a site, and so we provide much of the same use and bulk standards that would be found in a traditional zoning code. So the permitted uses that have been established for this site, there's a bunch of them: age-restricted housing, a community center, restaurants, retail sales and let me back up. Restaurants limited to the ground floor, retail sales and services limited to the ground floor, personal services limited to the ground floor. Same with banks and medical offices. Those ground floor uses, it's items C through F on that list, would certainly be publicly available. It's really to support the people living above it, so that they have conveniences right close to home. Then also government facilities, and that addresses the salt silo and the other functions that are to remain, at least for the time being, on the site.
Can I just add, we actually have a meeting last week with all the representatives for this project. And some of the things they worked out, which will be put part of the agreement, will be things like a meeting room that they're gonna have at the bottom that you're just talking about, that our community will have access to use. And we can actually set up times and dates to put that aside. Janice had said we can work that out. We also are talking and meeting again this Wednesday about how the salt structure is gonna be, and making our recycling center bigger and better. We're looking at trying to do an entrance in and an entrance out into our recycling, using some of this property that they're willing to sacrifice over to us to help make it work. So this is really a community project that's gonna do what they need and get what they want, and also help us downtown, especially with our recycling center. I just want everybody to know that we're looking at improving the recycling center greatly.
There are also accessory uses that are contemplated for the site. These are typical amenities and features that many development sites have, ranging from resident amenities to things like off-street parking signs, walls and fences, EV charging, all of the things that are pretty typically accessory to a mixed-use building.
I saw swimming pools on there. Are we getting a town swimming pool?
Unless they're putting one in, I don't know.
That's a just standard joke in Pompton.
It's on your wish list. So the bulk requirements, this sets forth the minimum lot sizes and dimensions that are typical to a zoning code. On this site, we do note that multiple structures are permitted on a single lot. This would allow the mixed-use building that showed in the concept that, I'll go back. It would contemplate the mixed-use building that you see sort of at the bottom of the screen, the long rectangular white building. But also at the top, you see a light green square, and there is some discussion that a community building or some other similar building could go at the front of the site there as well. So the bulk requirements that we've set forth are a minimum lot size of 1 acre, lot width of 100 feet, building height 4 stories and 60 feet. Other setbacks are fairly typical: front yard of 10 feet, rear yard of 40 feet, side yard of 10 feet. Building coverage of 20% and impervious coverage of 60, and the density is 25 units per acre or 65 dwelling units. So as I mentioned, the recycling center will remain at site. The salt dome will remain in a new location on the site. I should note that as the plan develops, as the site plan develops and the nuances of it are sorted out, bearing in mind that, the lot's not a standard rectangle and there are some quirks, when a redevelopment plan is adopted, the planning board has the authority to grant C variances, so like setbacks. And I just want to remind you of that because as the, particularly the side of the site with the salt dome and recycling, as the nuances of that are worked out, it is possible that the setbacks that we went through just a moment ago aren't quite perfect, and they might need relief from something here or there. I wouldn't expect it to be extreme, but I want to just remind this board that if that were to happen, you do have the authority and the jurisdiction to grant minor C variances. You do not have the authority to grant D variances in redevelopment areas. So what the planning board is looking for in this process is consistency with your master plan. So I pulled out some elements from your 2007 master plan and the 2017 reexamination that I thought were helpful in supporting this redevelopment plan and consistency with the town's vision. From 2007, the site is identified as being included in an area for redevelopment. The community services element indicates that the current DPW site is an inappropriate use for the district, and that it should be, the site should be redeveloped as a park or parking deck. And it recommends that the DPW site be relocated to an area with greater compatibility. Basically, that's not what would help a downtown be vibrant. And so the 2007 master plan recognized that. In 2017, again, the site was recognized as a site with redevelopment potential, and there were a number of goals and objectives that speak to the redevelopment of this site. Creating a new character for the downtown that capitalizes on its unique topography, waterfront location, mass transit access, to incorporate the Wanacue River as an amenity and make it accessible, to create stronger pedestrian connections to community facilities and buildings and neighborhoods, to enhance and maintain attractive gateways into the downtown, to provide ample and conveniently located municipal educational cultural facilities, to locate community facilities so they operate efficiently, and to provide expanded services for the borough's senior citizens. So in some way or another, all of those are furthered by the development that this redevelopment plan would allow. So the next step is you will discuss this tonight and decide what actions you want to take and make a recommendation to council based on your discussion. The council will review and approve, hopefully, a redevelopment plan. And once approved, the redevelopment plan will supersede the underlying zoning. Also in the process is a redeveloper's agreement, which I think was what was being part of the conversation about other amenities that the developer could provide. Those were things that would go into a redeveloper's agreement. And then once the site is really fleshed out and ready to, become reality, the applicant brings the proposed site plan to the redevelopment agency and then the planning board for your pretty typical review and approvals process. So that's the quick rundown of the redevelopment plan. I'm happy to talk about more of the nuances or explain the process again if you need to have any questions about that, but I'd like to take some questions.
Can you flip back to the graphic that showed the potential layout?
Yeah.
I think what this is doing is just giving you an idea of what they could build, but nothing's been presented in the way of design. This is...
Right, so
Just a question, is this generated by you or the
no,
town?
that's what I was about to say.
Oh.
This was something that the developer is using as a concept. It may very well look quite like this when they bring it in, but they are not bound to this. As long as they design a site that fits within the envelope and whatever that the standards that the redevelopment plan allows, this could change significantly, but this is what they were working with and shared with us as kind of a starting point.
Is the, is the tower on there? The telephone tower?
No.
It's not staying?
No, it is staying.
It is staying, okay. And this area here would be the salt dome,
Yes.
and that's kind of where our recycling is, so we're being moved on the site?
So I have another meeting with the county engineers on Wednesday to discuss what we want in a salt dome exactly. And it might not be a dome, it could be a square building. We're gonna talk out what's the best for us. The other thing is, everyone should know, we keep our salt in there. And that's one of the reasons when they were building this project, I went to them and said, we can't really remove the salt dome because we can't go all the way down to the county to pick up salt. So we're gonna keep continuing our salt supply in there, and there's even talks of maybe them picking up the cost of the salt. That's something we're gonna talk about in the future. So yes, going to what Mike's question was, we're going to try to meet where the dome could go and then get an entrance and exit into the recycling center.
Questions from the board? Please feel free to ask.
Yeah, good question. Well, the plan you said came from the potential developers of the site, but it's not in here.
No, because,
I'm just looking.
I always feel a little bit uncomfortable including that in the redevelopment plan because it's really just for informational purposes to spark your imagination. And when it's included in a redevelopment plan, a lot of people tend to think that that's what they're getting.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so that's why I gave a hopefully decent disclaimer before I showed you this tonight.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify that. So this plan has no status, zero, none.
Right, other than a conversation topic. I mean, it may very well come to you looking quite like this.
It might.
But you haven't,
right now.
you haven't approved it, so it's not
Right
real.
now, how much weight should I give this plan?
It's close.
This is permitted.
It's close.
It's permitted.
I mean, the zoning permits this layout.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can't read the writing on there. Can you tell me what's in the white building at the bottom and the hatched black at the top?
So the white building at the bottom is the proposed,
Recycling?
no, I think you're talking about the long,
Oh,
The long thin.
the long thing,
yeah.
that's like the mixed-use residential building. I'm trying to see if I can zoom this in. Oops. Of course, the resolution is medium.
No.
This is a existing building. This hatched one is an existing building to remain.
That's where the janitorial supply is right now.
That's not your property, right?
Correct.
No, it used to be.
Oh,
Used to be janitorial.
Battery company.
Oh, okay, whatever.
and this,
that's where the existing county garage is right now.
this little green one is the potential future community center, but that's a future potential, not likely immediate.
Right.
Is there a plan to take that current building down? That's there?
This,
County.
The garage.
oh,
Oh, yeah,
Garage,
there is.
yes.
So just make it green space or something for now.
exactly.
Okay.
Chairman, if you'd like, I can give a little background of why this project came. It's not with the redevelopment, but what it does to the community, what we're looking for. We're looking for senior housing. They came to us looking for senior housing. And the agreement that was worked out over time would be seniors and vets in Pompton Lakes would get first choice of this housing, okay? That means they go to the top of the list on both of those categories. After that, if we're not filled, it goes to North counties. So a town like a Patterson or a Passaic or a Clifton, they have their own senior housing. They would not be able to use this senior housing. So it would only go from here, north, Wanacue, Bloomingdale, West Milford, that kind of area to use. We have a 3-year waiting list in our senior housing building right now. They're looking at between 50 and 55 units on this. We're suspecting that we will probably fill it up mostly with Pompton Lakes residents before it even gets out of Pompton Lakes. So that was one of the advantages to us to bringing it in, because it does fill a need that we have, plus it adds the vet aspect that we didn't have before. So I just wanted to give you that, has nothing to do with this redevelopment agreement, but that's what everybody has.
How about in the parking? They, They show a number of spaces, and do you know offhand whether we're even close to having enough, considering 50 units and possible municipal use and first floor commercial use?
I don't think I
I'm just curious if it was figured or just they...
It was figured, and I don't have it on this screen.
Wasn't it 60 something?
Can I borrow your document?
Here, just,
Yeah, there was a lot of spots.
It was calculated, I don't remember the number. Okay. So here it is. So the parking. So the parking is to be provided in accordance with your existing parking standards. The total parking shall be the sum of the parking for each use. This does give the planning board a bit of discretion on shared parking. They do have to do EV. So whatever your existing parking numbers are, which are not reiterated in this, but this references the code section, those are the same ones that will apply to this building.
And the reason I asked is because it doesn't tell you anything, it just says it's gonna be in accordance with code, but
Right.
I don't know if anybody estimated how many spaces you would need
Oh,
for,
it was calculated at the time of the concept.
and it was calculated to be consistent with, so other than sharing spaces, like,
And some EV credits.
yeah.
Yeah.
okay. I mean, it's something that-
Correctly, there was over spots, there was more than spots that needed.
Okay.
That were what we needed.
Well, I'm just asking because of the proposed building in the front.
Yeah,
whether-
I don't know about the building in front, I'm talking.
If the building is, if and when a building on the front is ever presented to this board, at that time, they will need to show evidence that they, again, meet the bulk standards. So if the mixed-use building and parking lot is all compliant and built, and 10 years later, or however many, another building wishes to be developed at the front of the site, they will have to show that the cumulative parking on the site serves all the uses, including the new building. And if not, they can ask for a variance, because that's a C variance, but this board would have the call as to whether or not that's acceptable.
Okay. Could you go back to that other, I don't know if anybody else wants a different site up, but, different slide up, but, any other questions from the board?
Yeah, you wanna go?
Well, it was directly related to Mike's previous question about parking, actually. And does anybody know if we have a different standard for senior housing than for regular housing? Because I'm thinking, if it is going to be senior housing,
I don't know if it's actually.
Careful.
But it is. It makes a big difference.
Be careful. We drive.
yes.
All of us.
But do we have fewer, do seniors have fewer cars? I mean, there's no teenagers in, my household has 4 cars because we got 2 late teenagers. So I'm asking, do we think our senior housing parking requirements are different to other parking requirements?
It's probably related to the ones that we've put up multiple, floors like Meridian and,
No, actually, we had a project trying to sell themselves as a senior parking, and they wanted to use a lower number parking density just for the same reason.
Yeah.
And we didn't accept the fact that they were going in a senior building to get the lower number. There might be, and I don't know the laws on it, if there's a lower number for seniors, but normally there is a little bit of a lower use of cars for seniors than there is for.
I don't think we have that in any
I don't know if
ordinance
we do.
though.
But use the senior housing that we have in town. I will say that, remember years ago, they came and added that little parking area because they needed more people.
Yeah.
More people were driving.
Yeah.
So they did add that little piece.
Okay.
The salt dome, do you know how tall that is now? What's back there?
It's all.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, to move that up there, and right now it's kind of in a hole, it's down. So it doesn't look as, you know.
I don't think they're gonna build a dome.
I think something lower
It's gonna be
there,
like a shed type of. building.
something lower there.
Pretty
And
much.
something 30, 40, 35, 40 feet. And that's, I'm guessing that's 35 feet. That's really gonna look huge
They
there.
would, yeah. They're looking at that.
So, yeah, and I think it would be a good idea to take a good look at it and put something that's, you know, just fits. It doesn't look like it's.
So initially, they were gonna remove it completely and put it down on the Nike base on Route 23, because that's where they're moving their equipment to. But then we kind of said, look, how are you dealing with North County? You want it to West Milford, us, you gotta go all the way down there to pick up salt all the time, and we need the salt, so why don't we leave it there? So initially, it was in the plan to remove it completely, and we talked into keeping it, but I agree with you, it's tall, so we want it to look lower if possible.
Yeah, maybe a two-story house or something, you know, 19, 25 feet.
It might be taller than that, but I don't expect
Yeah,
it to
I'm
be
sure
anywhere
it's-
near as tall as it is. And Mike's right, it's basically a rectangular structure now, they do them differently. The salt domes are kind of like,
Maybe more like a shed. You know,
Yeah,
an open
he
front
actually has some
shed.
pictures of prefab salt domes, salt sheds, not domes.
Yeah.
They would look like stables almost, like big stables.
Okay.
Tim? Nothing? John?
Yeah, good. Can we get a little bit more explanation on ownership? Because you may mention that the county sold it to the contractor. So who is the contractor? Private, or is he part of the county? The housing authority, I believe you used the term.
The contractor, do you mean the property owner?
redeveloper.
Who will be
Do you-
the,
Yeah, okay, so that was a good question, because I asked the same question. The county initially had no part in this, but they didn't have enough funding in the housing authority, which is a quasi group of the county. It's a semi-fold underneath it. So they didn't have enough money themselves to do this, so the county is going to lend them some money to put into this project. They will not be an owner of the project. They're just a note holder, basically, until they get paid back. They will not be the responsible party, though, in any shape or form. This housing authority will be, which is, it's a semi-county group, but not an official county group. They work with the county, though.
okay, so what does that mean in tax revenue?
So that's another good question. Remember, this property was paying no taxes because it was county. Now we will be collecting taxes on it, yes. And we worked out a pilot agreement with them, just like we do with all the other pilots that we do, to bring in money. So they will be bringing in tax revenue off this building that we did not report. And if they put any retail on the bottom, which is, there was talk of doctor's offices, that would be done, charged at a different rate because it's now retail.
Okay, very good. And then just the next step. So if we approve it, then what benefit does that give the contractor if we adopt it or not?
I can touch that. This redevelopment plan is the zoning, so this is a zoning ordinance. So you're doing your consistency with the master plan. So that, all that does is put that I put together resolutions, you can doctor it if you want, but it says it's consistent with the master plan. We say adopt it with no changes. You don't have to do that. That would now, zoning is in place. The way the redevelopment law states is that once there is a designation and a redevelopment plan, which is the zoning, then the municipality has power to enter into a contract. It actually doesn't have power to enter into a redevelopment agreement until this zoning is in place. That kind of like, all those powers exist, but two things have to be done. It has to be a designation, has to be a redevelopment plan. Once this is done, then those things can happen. That's what it is. It sets the zoning, so it sets what the rules are going to be, but it also is the trigger for the municipality and the redevelopment agency to have power to actually enter into that redevelopment agreement.
So the next step would, in reality, once we do our thing, goes back to the council. Council will take a vote. Is that going to be tomorrow night?
We have a presentation early at 7 o'clock.
Okay, so that goes back to the council tomorrow night, assuming that everything's okay on that second reading, it becomes approved completely. Then it goes to the redevelopment agency when they're ready to come for the plan, something other than, general layout. But they'll actually come with a plan, which ultimately comes back here again for our normal planning board review. So it's a back and forth like 4 times or something, and eventually the final approval is actually here. So we get to say, okay, now that everything is presented in the way that they want it to be, and the redevelopment agency is in agreement, we review it just like any other site plan. And then once we approve that, it can go into construction once they're financing in place.
Got
So, and that is intended to be a pilot, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting the way this concept, the good thing about it is that it's very, very public oriented. People have an opportunity to see it at every stage, and everything is done in a way that's very transparent. And so the end result is that there should be no questions at the end as to what's going on. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I've got another one, I'm afraid.
Sure.
I'm a bit confused, I think, about the restaurants and the retail and the banks and the medical and the personal services. Personal services are nail salons and hair salons, yeah. Because we talk about it being, near downtown and other walkable neighborhoods. And then we say any of those uses are acceptable, but with an expectation that they're for the people upstairs.
Well, they're not gonna be strictly for the people upstairs, but I think that, any, business owner is probably gonna see that as a great, almost built-in customer base. So it's great for a doctor's office, for, the retirees who live upstairs. That doesn't mean that you can't go there too.
Yeah. I was thinking if, say somebody put in a Subway. We don't have a Subway sandwich shop at the moment. We had one that closed. If you put that in, that's great because the people upstairs can come downstairs for a Subway. But it also means that people from across town are going to be coming here saying, "Oh, I want to go to Subway."
Mhm.
And that concept plan doesn't seem to be oriented for public use of the retail units. It just kind of feels like it's trying to do three things and not achieve any of them.
I don't think after meeting with the people that put this project together, that their initial need right now is going to be a retail like that. I think they're bringing their offices in there, so they're,
Right.
the talk is that they would bring their offices, I think they're in Patterson now, to in there. There would be a meeting room for the use of the people upstairs to use, and we would also use, and maybe a doctor's office or two at the most. They never once talked about like an actual retail store,
Right.
which could happen, I'm not saying it can, but they've never actually mentioned that.
So why have we got restaurants and retail and
It's probably
personal services and
covering
banks?
Because
In here.
if they find, a bank that wants to go in there, because they've got a handful of customers upstairs, if that's not in the plan, then we have to either tell them that can't be there, or you need to reopen the redevelopment plan and amend the whole document. If it's not an offensive use, and we're okay with it, then it just seems best to include all of those possibilities.
Hmm.
And we're just talking first floor only.
Correct.
It's not really planning though, is it?
What do you mean?
We're not really making a plan. We're just saying, oh, anything can go in. If this is going to be the redevelopment plan.
I think what Steve's saying is, why don't we limit it? What would the benefit of not doing that be?
Well, for one thing, you don't want to limit the uses so much that you cannot find a tenant and you have vacant space downstairs. That's probably the worst case scenario, is to have unoccupied storefronts. And so.
If we didn't allow retail, then there wouldn't be storefronts to be unoccupied.
I'm, because I've been in numerous meetings, this is not about retail. There might be no retail in this. At all.
Yeah. So why is it in the redevelopment?
Probably just to cover all the bases in case they change your mind, and I agree with what you're saying. What I'm saying is, their concept at this moment is to build a building for the seniors and vets, maybe have a doctor's office or two, bring their office down there, and that covers all the space. There was never talk of maybe we'll get a bank, or maybe we'll get a Subway or any of that. Can it happen? I'm sure it can.
So why doesn't our redevelopment plan reflect what we want to happen?
I think they're just leaving their.
Bear in mind that until a redeveloper's agreement is signed, the redeveloper entirely could change. If the people who are in discussions right now, like are abducted by aliens, another group of people could come in who have a different vision of what's happening on the ground floor, and it might be equally.
But isn't that for us to decide what should be happening on the ground floor. I like the plan the concept plan that Mike's been talking about at the moment. That sounds great. That sounds wonderful. But what I'm trying to avoid is somebody coming along and saying, right, I'm going to build 50 units and have a Subway and a Kmart and or a 7-Eleven and making this a retail strip mall.
If I could address that a little bit, and the job of this board, and I'm not going to limit the discussion, but the job of the board, this board makes the master plan. That's your job, so you do the what should be done every place in the municipality.
Yeah.
And your job on every bit of zoning, every new zoning ordinance is to say, look at the master plan, is it consistent with it? Is there any things that are inconsistent? What should be done is a planning thing that the governing body does. Do this and this and this, and we don't want that. That's something for the governing body. Your job is it consistent with the master plan? And then you're allowed to say everything else. So if you want to make recommendations, we don't think it ought to have retail and everything else, you can. That's your prerogative. The board's prerogative, it has that role. But the major role is look at the master plan, look at this zoning ordinance. Is there any inconsistency? Is there something the master plan says, don't do this, and they're putting it in there? That's job number one. Job number two is anything else you might want, which is kind of a little bit of advice, but the governing body decided they like it. They want retail. But you not recommend you don't want it, I understand it. That's not particularly the job of the planning board, it comes back to you. That's theirs. That being said, I'm not limiting anything. Any recommendation this board wants to make, it is in your power to do that.
This is DBD 2?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the zone that's downtown business development 2, consistent with that area. And so this is consistent with DBD 2.
Yeah.
The uses, right? I mean, that's what it basically comes down to, so.
Is it DBD2? I thought this was a different, I thought we'd zone, I thought this was identified in the master plan as a redevelopment area. Is it DBD2?
Double checking.
I thought this one was.
Yeah, DBD2 and AH2.
Okay, so maybe we can send.
Well, those are the uses that are acceptable in DBD2, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what we can do, based on what Andy's saying, is it's consistent, yes, it's consistent. However, we would recommend to the mayor and council that they look at the intensity of some uses or look at the full breadth of all of them and we can tell them to look at it, but that's it.
Yeah.
It's a recommendation.
There's nothing we
Everything you
can
do
do.
is recommending.
Right.
And in fact, if you do nothing, after 45 days, they can adopt it.
Right.
If you say this is inconsistent with the master plan, they can override that as long as they put the right statements on the record. This is a recommendation that you make, but it's because you drafted the master plan. You are seen as, and you're experts in your master plan. That's why you do that, but everything you do is recommending, and so, as the chairman said, recommend anything you want. That is your power. But the first power is consistency with the master plan, and then anything else you may want to recommend, or you think it'll work better, or something like that. That's legitimate. That's a
Okay, so
legitimate thing.
we've decided it's consistent with the master plan because it's zoned as DBD2,
Right.
Downtown Business District 2. So the
I think that, you believe the master plan and what she had put up was the goals of the master plan. And those seem to be, I think her testimony or discussion was that, in fact, those goals would in fact be furthered by implementing pursuant to the way the plan is written. I think that was what it is. So that would be, that, if you look at that and you agree with that, it leads to the conclusion that it's consistent with the master plan. That doesn't get on to your other recommendations though. So your first goal is, first question, is it consistent with the master plan? Second, any other recommendations?
So,
But even in the 2017 reexamination, it doesn't mention anything about retail there.
no, yeah.
Which means it's not inconsistent. You're absolutely right. It doesn't say anything about retail. So there's no inconsistency. There's nothing that the master plan says X and it says not X. That doesn't exist. There are things that are in some, but they don't, I think that you're actually, I shouldn't be telling you what to do. But the question is, are there things that are in conflict? Not one and nothing in the other, but are they in conflict? That would be the inconsistency.
I would,
But if you find them inconsistent,
I'm not even looking for inconsistencies, I'm looking for common sense. If we're lacking senior housing, and you're worried about having open, office space, why don't we just make it all senior housing? Is there a reason they
Typically, a
wouldn't do
middle
that?
high-rise building is often not gonna have ground floor residential anyway. It's just not ideal
I don't know
living
about
space,
that.
looking out on a parking
So
lot.
I've met with these groups a couple, probably 6, 8 times over the last year and a half over this. There has never once been any discussion of retail on the bottom, okay? The only retail they were talking about is possibly a doctor's office if they had the space to even put it in there. They're pretty much filled up right now with what they're building with above floors, their office, and a meeting room on the bottom to cover most of the space. I've never, and I understand you want to limit the retail, and that's a suggestion, according to Andy, you could make to the mayor and council. But there's been no discussion by mayor and council, there's been no discussion by anybody about what can we squeeze in there? Can we put a McDonald's in there? Can we do that? No one has talked. Now, can that happen? Probably, maybe, but we've had no discussion of that at all.
That's great. That's exactly where I think it should be going. But if that falls apart, and as we say, if somebody comes along and says, right, okay, now I'm proposing something completely different, like the last people, they've gone bust or they've walked away or sudden, if somebody else comes along, they're gonna look at this and say, oh, great, I can have retail. And we end up in a situation where I'm uncomfortable with it.
Well, let's look at the wording that we need to get back to the council. And the primary sentence is that the proposed ordinance, which the council prepared, is consistent with the master plan. That's what we have to deal with. We can make any recommendations this board wants to make. I'm just repeating a little bit what Andy said already. But the main finding of this board is it consistent with the master plan, yes or no? And there's nothing on here that shows that it's inconsistent with the master plan. So that's part A. Part A is, it is or is not consistent with the master plan. Part B is, and any other comments we want to make. That's the part where we can offer suggestions. So what we ultimately have to vote on is, A, is it consistent or not? And B, and I'm going to rely on Andy to define that if we need it. And then B, is there anything else we want to say about it that we could recommend to the mayor and council for their consideration? Because we have very limited authority on this application. It's not a site plan review, it has nothing to do with approvals. We don't have to approve, we cannot approve anything. All we can do is say that the master plan and this proposal are consistent. And by the way, you should look at this. So that's the decision we need to make. Anything other than that is we're out of our league and we don't have the ability to do that. So I just want to make sure we refocus on exactly what's in front of us and what our responsibilities are. While you guys dwell on this, I'm going to just open it up to the public for any comments that they have. And we'll come back, make some deliberation and whatever you guys want, and then take a vote. Please hang on while we go through the rest of this. I'm going to open this meeting to the public. Anyone from the public wish to comment on the review of the ordinance 23-27 that the council has provided us? Seeing none? Yes? Okay, come up, you know the routine.
No, just questions.
Up, name,
Randy,
and address.
443 Montclair Ave.
Thank you.
This entirely looks like a proposed project. You don't have an actual building design right now, and you're going according to the master plan. I just had a couple of questions. How many apartments were proposed? And the mayor had said around 50, 55. And that's pretty much what it's going to be, even when they come up with a design.
This board has no idea what it's gonna be. There's been general discussions. I think that the pictures that you saw are not part of they're not part of the ordinance. That's just the presentation, just so you get an idea what's there.
Okay.
what could potentially be there. But, you know, like anything, it sets a density of no more than 65. That means you could have 2 units, you could have 40, you could have 65. Nothing is done. There have been discussions, but what this board is looking at, it's a zoning ordinance, saying you can do X, Y, and Z, and this is how big it can be. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but.
No, you said what I was going
Okay.
And what is the height on that? Could be 5 stories?
Up
6
to 4 stories and 60 feet, I think.
Up to what?
4 stories and 60 feet.
4 stories and 6 feet.
It could be 1 story, it could be 2, it could be 3, that's just the maximum.
The maximum is 4 stories. All right, and vehicles, you guys have been discussing that. You really can't discuss that until you know how many units are gonna be in the building.
That's true. The number of units is going to be how the formula for parking is calculated.
Right, and that was a curious question that Steve had about amount of vehicles per unit between seniors and between residential.
Yeah,
Other-
I don't, yeah.
I think we decided that Pompton Lakes has one standard across the board. There's
And
not.
that standard is?
It's the residential site, it's RSIS.
Yeah, it's RSI's, I believe,
1.1.
RSI's is based off of the number of bedrooms.
So it's like 1.3 vehicles per bedroom or per 2 bedroom?
I think it's like 1.8.
It's something like that,
Yes.
per like, nobody knows the exact number. The this board could eventually give variances from it, but yeah, it's roughly, it's a certain number of parking spaces per bedroom count.
But we don't even know how many units are yet.
Well, informationally, this has nothing to do with your application, but again, because I'm part of these meetings. The proposal is 1-bedroom units, all 1-bedroom units, a maximum of 2 people, husband and wife, per them, but most of them could be single people, because a lot of older people are single, at the maximum of 2. That's what's proposed, that's not in this plan, it has nothing to do with your discussion, it's just information that I'm throwing out there for you.
And that's why, again, I just want to, again, refocus. All these questions, Randy, would typically be done in a site plan review. We would have all of those conversations with everything in a lot of detail. But because of the limitations that we have to focus on consistency or not consistent.
Right.
And
So the master.
the comments are well received, thank you for them. But tonight, we decide on consistency only and recommendations if.
So we're really at just the beginning of this project.
We're at the end of one phase, because now it goes to the council for approval. So once they do it, it's done as far as the redevelopment plan, then comes to the redevelopment agency when they have design documents. And those design documents will then, like I said, come back here. We can comment then on a lot of other things because we now have a site plan review, but we are then restricted by whatever comes from the redevelopment agency, because as you probably know, redevelopment agency is where a lot of the things are set, and then we get some general site plan review from that. So if they approve a 4-story building, and we say, no, we only want 3, that doesn't matter anymore, because that's approved there. So everybody gets their piece of the action, and our piece of the action tonight is limited, and in the final site plan review, we have a little more.
All right, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Seeing no one else in the audience, I'm going to close the public session. And Kristen, is there anything else that you wanted to add to any of this?
No, I would just add, the one thing that I would add is that the site is currently in the downtown. And I think that it's important to keep in mind that in a traditional downtown, you want an active use on the ground floor. Now, this board may decide that, this particular site is an exception to that practice, and there is reason not to allow active uses on the ground floor, and you would rather see just residential down there at your discretion. But I think keeping in mind that it is in a downtown, I would just bear that geography in mind when deciding if there should or should not be a ground floor retail, commercial, medical office type use. But certainly make the recommendations that you think are best for this community, and we'll go with it.
And Chairman, one of the reasons they picked this building, by the way, is because for seniors, they wanted an area for them to get access to the supermarket, to shopping, where they could walk and not need a car. And that's why this building kind of stood out to them, because it's across the street from a supermarket, there's ample stores to shop in, you got downtown if they wanted to walk. It's a walkable area for the seniors that would be using this project.
Okay, does the board have any other questions, or do you want to go into deliberation? I mean, I think we exhausted most everything we need. Sorry, so at this point, we could have a motion to determine the consistency, and then after the second, we can have discussion. So I would look to someone to start off the process with a motion.
I make the motion that we recommend to the council that this meets the requirements that they're looking.
So you're saying that it is consistent with the master plan?
Correct.
Okay, and I need a second for that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Anything else that anyone wants to have discussion on, now's the time.
I think to clarify my point, now that I've heard and thought about it, on the scheme that we've seen that the mayor is discussing with the developers, quite rightly, we wouldn't expect to have a McDonald's in there at ground floor, and that's not proposed. If we had a different scheme, let's say the building was on the Ringwood Avenue frontage, you might have more accessible retail to the general public. If we had a different configuration, then retail might be acceptable. I don't think retail is appropriate in that configuration, but there might be a configuration where retail is acceptable.
They don't have enough room at the front because of the other building that's there.
Well, let's say that goes, or you know, I'm saying that.
I think the best way to address this is you didn't see that.
Yeah.
You didn't see that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
there, it's not presented.
Yeah.
We don't know
That's
what
why I
it
asked
is.
what it was about
Yeah,
at the beginning.
Yeah, it's gone, because we don't know what it's gonna look like.
Yeah.
And the danger with these, proposals or,
Concepts.
it's a concept plan that is like, this is what we can
They
fit.
never look like they do it.
It may look 180%, 180 degrees different, so,
But to Steve's point with, you know, you're gonna have another issue with parking because you're gonna calculate things differently with parking, with retail down there, or office space down there, or doctor space down there, because there's different formulas. You know, so many square feet for an office, for a doctor's office, you gotta have so many parking spaces. Now you're taking parking spaces away from the residents. You're proposing senior housing. You know, seniors don't want cars driving in and out of their parking lot at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, because somebody's gonna come and get a soda and a gallon of milk, or, you know, some ice cream or something. So I kind of agree with the no retail. If there's a doctor's office there, or there's senior servicing offices there, or veteran services, that's office space. They close those up at 5 or 6 o'clock.
I'm not, retail is retail, you can't split it up in the zoning code. But what if it was a coffee shop or a convenience store, would that also be objectionable?
You know, if you're talking like a 7-Eleven or a Wawa or something
Yeah.
like that, yeah, I would.
But so that's the conundrum, is that if you allow retail, if you don't allow retail, you're not gonna have whatever it is that you don't like, but you're also not gonna get a Wawa, or whatever it is.
so let's, again, I'm trying to bring us back to center. I understand what you're saying, but that's really see if you agree with this, it's prerogative of the redevelopment agency as to what they allow on that site. Once we do that, we're not proposing conditions on the zone. We're just saying it's consistent with what the zone shows. So consequently, if we say nothing more than it's consistent, and by the way, you know, you should think about whether or not you want to have retail. Let's say that's the extent of what we can say. All that's going to happen is this is going to go to the council. The council will hopefully approve it, and then whoever is going to develop the site in whatever way they plan, they come in with a 7-story building and they want to put 2 Wawas underneath. That's going to the redevelopment agency, not here. And so the redevelopment agency can't give that because it exceeds the requirements of this zone. So the redevelopment agency would be the one to initially screen all of that. Is that correct? And they're gonna send it to us as a relatively final plan?
I agree with what you say. I think I agree with everything you said. With the recommendation, I mean, the reason that you all write the master plan, the reason you do consistency, the reason you do all this, is there is a presumption that this board is the expert in the planning of your town. So thoughts on what may or may not be in there are not a terrible thing. They're not often put there, but they're not a terrible thing, because you are presumed to be expert. So you're presumed to be expert in the master plan, which you wrote and approved, but then also to have input on ideas for the governing body to consider. The governing body is not bound by it whatsoever. They can come in, they can pass it, as long as it's consistent with and even if you say it's inconsistent. So my short version is a thought or two on what may or may not be good on that site is within your purview. As long as you've made the decision, first off, it's consistent or not with the master plan, and then other thoughts, that's within your discretion.
And what he said, I agree with, but I have a question about that. Isn't that we'll get into an area of spot zoning? I mean, we can't say one business and not another.
No, but types of businesses, spot zoning is typically changing the zoning for a particular property, for a particular entity to benefit that entity. So taking out a permitted use wouldn't be spot zoning if there are other things. You're not doing that to benefit a particular one. If there's a belief that retail is not good in that place, making that recommendation as a comment to the governing body, it's within your purview. Again, the governing body's not bound by that at all.
And that's why we have, we've put a lot of faith in our boards. We have great boards, and we have great people on our board. So when you guys make recommendations to the council, we don't just listen, we listen to it because you guys did all the legwork on this. Same thing with redevelopment, same thing with zoning. So, if there's stipulations you're putting in, it's not just gonna be ignored. We're gonna address it. If you don't want to put stipulations, that's fine too. That would be your purview to do whatever you want. I just wanna make sure, and I'm agreeing with what she's saying too, is that maybe a small coffee shop is an advantage to the people that are living there, not a disadvantage. Maybe it's someone who doesn't want to walk a block to get something. Maybe they like it's in their own store. I'm not even saying that's going to happen. My feeling is it won't happen, but maybe it does. So, you got to look on both sides of that. Now, is a Wawa going to go there? No. Is a McDonald's going to go there? No. Kmart going there?
Drive-ups are banned from this
Yes,
particular
yes,
thing,
yes.
so you're not going to get a McDonald's or a drive-through restaurant. But I search for banks every day, and I can tell you, as sure as God made little green apples, there's no bank going to take a spot in there. And I can tell you that the Subway's not going to go there because they couldn't make a living where they were. This is going to put them deeper in nowhere land.
Yeah, it's a franchise.
50 families is not going to make or break a business there. Or it's not going to make a business, it'll break a business. That's
So-
just my opinion.
So if you guys want to include well, we have a motion in a second. So what we can do, if you want to, is ask the maker and the seconder if they want to add in a recommendation to the mayor and council in conjunction with the motion, which is saying we find it consistent. We can do that. If you just want to have a separate letter sent from here, we could do that. So what would your preference be? Do you want A, to add recommendations, or B, approve it just as is? And if there's no recommendations, then I'll take a vote, roll call vote. If there are recommendations, then speak up now.
Can I ask the chairman, you would know the answer to this, if for some chance something, when it went to redevelopment or to us, came up in something that you're discussing, you can still write that letter at that moment, can't you? Or can it all be done now?
I don't know, probably.
The important part, the theory on this, why it should go now, is that the governing body, before second reading, could make a change. They could say, you know what, we're can reconsider this. So you could always write that letter later on. You could write that they should change the zoning and take out retail. Absolutely, the board can occasionally do that, and boards do that. But since it's not adopted yet, it's not final yet, this would be the time if there was such a thing. And the planning board and the redevelopment agency, they have the power, since they have authority to not sign a redevelopment agreement if it is going to be a Wawa or anything else. Say, nope, we're not going to do it. So there's a few more, roadblocks there that they couldn't just put in something that would be inappropriate.
And I would also point out that a redevelopment agreement can include stipulations such as hours of operation or whatever, so that if there was concern that in this tucked away, site where retirees are trying to have a little peace and quiet, well, no, the businesses can't be open past 7 PM or whatever they decide the right time is. Like, that's also a way to control what's going on in the site.
Okay, we have a motion before us, either change it or let's vote on it. Or not change it, but supplement it or let's vote on it. Roll call vote.
To expand on the point I started on, I'd now turned 360 degrees and do not want to amend this, because the reason is there could be a scheme where retail would be acceptable. Look at the Meridian development. Meridian development is four or five stories, and it's got a retail and a cafe on the front, on the frontage, and that's fine. That works perfectly. I think that's really good. The scheme, I suppose the fly in the ointment is seeing the scheme that's been presented to us.
Go like this.
I looked at it and thought, no, don't retail in that. But actually, if it was a Meridian style scheme with a frontage to Ringwood Avenue, then a coffee shop or a McDonald's would be fine. That's no
Right, but
problem.
we're talking about this project, not.
No, we're
Meridian.
talking
We
about
shouldn't be talking about this
No, we're not
project.
talking
It's
about
just a concept.
the mayor's
It's a-
project.
It's an
We're
idea.
talking about,
We're talking about zoning
yeah,
only.
yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, let's call a roll call. We have a motion to find that the ordinance 23-27 that the council forwarded to us is consistent with the borough's master plan, and it is a recommendation of the planning board that it be adopted in its current form without revision. That's what's shown on the proposed resolution. That's what you have agreed to, that's what you have agreed to. Roll call, please.
Okay. Mr. Simone?
Yes.
Mr. Trost?
Yes.
Mr. Francaro?
Yes.
Ms. Michael?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mr. Keating?
Yes.
Mr. Aguilar?
Yes.
Mr. Bowlby?
Yes.
Mayor
All
Sarah?
right, thank you all.
Can I say something?
I'm sorry?
I don't often say this, that was a great discussion. And I think that's exactly why boards are supposed to be assertive and have your thoughts. That's why things come to the planning board. I think, I don't often see this on this type of review. I thought it was a good
So
idea.
do you think the concept was helpful or harmful for the discussion?
More harmful than helpful?
Okay.
They're always
For
helpful.
future reference, I was really on the fence about whether I should show that, and so this was a learning
We're all
process.
curious. We're all curious. I'm glad I saw it from, oh yeah, they can fit all that.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, that was the same problem we had with that subdivision, remember?
Yeah.
We had a big discussion where they showed a proposed layout, and they showed for some proposed site improvements. And even I got caught in that, where I was talking about one of the site improvements, and it was like, no.
Yeah.
No, it's the subdivision. Either it works or it doesn't work on its own.
Right.
The question was gonna be asked, so
I know.
So, yeah, it was gonna be asked, so,
It's, you know,
Yeah.
thank you for the compliment. Our board members are excellent. I've always said that. Okay, so that takes care of that item. The other thing we have is a resolution. Just had the damn,
three lot subdivision.
There it is. Yeah, we had a resolution, PB 23-01, Stephen D. DePaul, Grant Avenue subdivision, Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, block 3203, lot 30, zone R4. Have you had a chance to review the subdivision resolution? And if so, what is your pleasure?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
And a second by Mr. Otto. Mr. Vaccaro, Mr. Otto. Questions, comments? None? Roll call, please.
Mr. Simone?
Yes?
Mr. Trost?
Yes.
Mr. Fracaro?
Yes.
Ms. Michael?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Mr. Keating?
Yes.
Did I just? Mr. Aguilar, you were,
Present.
and Mr. Bowlby?
Yes.
Thank you.
I was present.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to open up the meeting to this point to the public for any questions on off our agenda. Has anyone? Okay, seeing no comments from the public, I'll close the open public session. And is there anything that members want to bring up before our board? Yes,
Mr. Chairman. We had an applicant come to us they had to make some adjustments after something was built. And we've had some stipulations. I think we had to make another resolution. Is there a way to find out from our building department, have a report back from our engineer to say, has everything been satisfied?
when you say changes, changes to something that we approve specifically, or just?
Correct. So like, say, for example, the car wash, they had to come back a second time because there were some amendments that were needed. Can we get a report back from our engineer saying, yes, everything has been set?
Well, without calling the car wash by name,
Yes.
we do have a problem with car wash.
Oh.
I have asked Sal to check why we did not get the covering for the spots in the parking area. We were supposed to get that blue cover, and why we didn't get the shrubs planted that block the screen the headlights on Ringwood Avenue. I did not get an answer back from Mr. Pauly. Would you please tell him that the board requests an update in writing as to the status of that, and since they're well beyond the time frame that they were supposed to provide this, what he shall be doing to remedy it. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me, but I
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
did ask him, and he said he would look into it, and that is exactly what we have the responsibility for. So thank you, John.
Thank you.
Some of the board members had asked about an update on this CGM building. They had put in their permits. They are planning to build the building. Sal is in final review of those permits, which should be up in the next week or two. Once they get the final approval on the permits, they then, once it's stamped and it's approved, they then have 60 days to start working on the project or can lose their redevelopment agreement. So that's where we are with that project. He insists he has the funding and he will be building it. Hopefully the next week it will be stamped, and then the clock starts on 60 days. So,
Yeah, CJM's been a headache for a while now. What is it, over about a year and a half or two?
yeah, it's way, and where the nut falls down on the wrong way there is, it's when the plans are signed. There's no room in there until they're signed, so he can drag it out until they're signed. But it doesn't do him an advantage because he can't build it at that point either, so he's losing money every day that goes by. But now that he's got the plans put in, we can hold him to something, so that's where we are.
He would have been better off leaving the building intact until he was ready to
I
actually
agree
construct.
100%, yes.
Out of our hands.
Yes.
Thank you for the update, Mayor. Any other questions? One thing I did want to mention, that it's not our purview, but there is a plan by the county to replace the Dawes Avenue Bridge. That's something that's imminent, like within a year or so.
All three bridges will get done. We're gonna do the Lennox Bridge, Hirschfield Bridge, and the Dawes Bridge that's a separate issue where we just hired a consultant because we're trying to argue that they need to raise the bridge a little bit and widen it, let more water flow through so we don't flood as much downtown. The county has come back and said we are not allowed to do that because it costs more flooding downstream. So we've now hired a consultant to prove that that's not true, and this could drag out. But we have one shot at this when they're redoing this Dawes Bridge to make it work, so the water doesn't hit the walls and start spreading out all over the place. We were hoping they were just gonna say, okay, we'll do that, but they won't, so that's where we are.
Thank you for doing that. One of the discussions I had was that we've gotten squeezed by the dam where it allows more water to pass our way, even though the state and Corps of Engineers said it won't affect Pompton. So apparently it's okay to push more water into Pompton, but it's not okay to push more water out of Pompton. And so I don't want to become the point where no man's land is, and we end up with more water than we should have. So, but when that Dawes Highway Bridge is replaced, hopefully it'll be replaced properly, and secondly, is we're gonna have a major traffic nightmare for quite a while they do on that. The other two bridges that you mentioned, you might as well just mention that anyway for informational purposes only.
The bridge here behind Max, going into West Lennox area, and the bridge going into Hirschfield. We worked out a deal where we're going to have the county pay to install these new bridges, and then we're gonna take responsibility for the new bridges moving forward. The good news on those two bridges will be there will be no stanchions underneath it blocking the flow of water when we do flood. So that's gonna help those areas and those residents, and I happen to be one of those residents who lives down that way. The water does sway out to the left and right when the stuff gets stuck against the legs of those bridges. There'll be no legs, there'll be one-piece bridges that'll be dropped in, mounted on each end of the corner, here and in Hirschfield, both the same. And then, the DuPont Bridge, which we call the DuPont Bridge, but DuPont is not taking responsibility, said it's not their bridge. County says it's not their bridge, we say it's not our bridge. The county has decided to say, we pay for the engineering at a very large cost, it'll be over 200 grand to engineer that bridge. They take ownership of the bridge and put it in. So we're gonna have to pay for the engineering of that bridge, and then there'll be a new bridge there also.
Now, are they gonna widen that opening as well?
I don't think so.
Okay, so in the world of inconsistencies, we have the county saying we're gonna take out the center column and we're gonna have that wide open so it doesn't trap any debris and the water flows, what? More out of that area, right? And yet we're not gonna do that on the Dawes Bridge because we don't wanna push more water out of that area when all three rivers end up in the same exact spot. So,
This is true.
Michael, wish that guy good luck. I hope he beats them up. Yeah, and I'm saying that seriously.
No,
because-
he's number one guy in this field, hard to get hold of.
Is it Agnoli?
No,
Oh.
it's a guy everyone reaches out to him to do this kind of work.
Okay.
He's very busy, but it's not uphill fight, I'm not gonna lie.
Well,
I got some good news that I'll kind of announce here, I was gonna announce tomorrow. I had applied with the Congressman's office, Congressman Pasquarello, they have soft money to use to spend on projects that Washington has to pick and Pasquarello has to pick. We got picked, believe it or not, to redo our library, $500,000. They're gonna give us.
Great.
So, you know,
Congratulations.
it's not official yet, I'm waiting for the signed paperwork, but I got a call from the Congressman's office yesterday stating that we got the grant for $500,000, so that's a big push for the library. The library is a historic building and needs a lot of work.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
Is that remediation rather than,
We can do whatever we want with it, but it's
Right.
gonna be to stop all the leaking that's going
Yeah.
on in there, replace all the windows, replace part of the roof, and then maybe redo the rooms upstairs, you know, the meeting rooms, all that, depending on how much. 500 sounds like a lot, but it goes quick.
Any other comments or questions from members of the board? If not, I'll take a motion for adjournment. So moved. Second, anybody? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for a wonderful job again. Kristen, thank you for coming with the presentation.
good?